So the Go York 2045, as you know, we've been going through this for quite some time. Ben, if you could go to the next slide, and we'll go right into the timeline. So Go York 2045 is the name of the plan that we're using for the public, and it's the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is more the official name from Federal Highway for York County. It's also being treated as the county comprehensive plan for the county as well, too, the transportation element of the county comprehensive plan. So this is just a high-level overview of the timeline. We're there at the third bullet point. We're going to be asking for you to approve the public participation process. So for this plan to go out for public participation, we're not approving the document at this point in time. We're not even tentatively approving the document. We are only approving the concept of the public involvement to start the public comment period, the final public comment period. We've had public comment through the development, but this would be the last step, which is a 45-day public comment period. Also, the technical and the transit committees will also be meeting on June 3rd to give recommendations back to the coordinating committee, and then the coordinating committee will talk and take final action on June 24th. After that, hopefully the coordinating committee would make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners as well, or to the Planning Commission, and then ultimately to the Board of Commissioners for action as the County Comprehensive Plan. Next slide, please, Ben. Just a high-level overview of the document. Again, this is there's an introduction. There's the York County is, which is talking about the demographics of York County, population growth, and other things that are going on. Moving forward is really the meat of this whole thing. Heather will talk about a lot of the actions or some of the actions as we move forward and give an example of those. Chapter 4 is corridor area policy. So the MPO has already taken action and develop policies for Route 15, for Route 30, disaster flooding funding as well too. So there's a couple of policies that we incorporated in the ID3 exit 24 to 28 recommendations. So those policies were incorporated, and we're trying to keep them all in one place so that the public can see one place for all the policies that we have. So we incorporate that into the long range or the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Chapter 5 is a review of all the public involvement that we did previously, and we will also add in another section once this public comment period is completed as well too. And then Chapter 6 is talking about the selection criteria for maintenance, congestion, also bridge work, as well as congestion mitigation, air quality funding, and transportation alternatives, which is your kind of like a sickle and pedestrian set aside money. And then Chapter 7 is talking about the funding revenues over the next 25 years. So out to 2045 and what those projections look like. Now, we have a note in here, and Chris will probably talk about this, but it is pre-pathways. It is pre-bridge tolling. Since we have no ideas what those are going to be at this point in time, we have a note in there saying that these efforts are going on and that we'll have to reevaluate our funding projections once those decisions are made. There's also talk at the federal level too of what a new legislation might look like. So all that is still up in the air, but you know that always happens. There's always a new piece of legislation that's being talked about or changes that are happening. So that's par for the course. So we'll change as that happens. And then Chapter 8 is risk management, and one of those risks is funding. And so we added this new part in to the plan that talks about risk and what happens if A happens or B happens. How does that impact our targets that we have set for our assets, for our congestion, or for our safety as well? So that's a risk management side. It's a very small portion, but it's starting to get us to think and starting to get our stakeholders to think about the risk, because we plan documents, but most of the time we talk about them like they're going to come true. Like it is going to happen this way, and this is the way it's going to be. And we got to be a little bit more honest to show these scenarios of where the world doesn't turn out exactly how we plan it. Because otherwise I'd be in the NFL right now. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, if you would, Ben. And I'm going to pass it off to Heather to talk about Chapter 3 and some of these actions.
Okay, so like Will said, Chapter 3 is moving forward. Chapter 3 is broken into two parts, however. The first part is current practice. And under that current practice is a description of what the subsection is. It also has all the trend data that we're collecting and using. In addition, it has targets that are statewide and York County targets. Next slide, Ben. Here is an example of the statewide targets are shown in a table form. And as you can see below is the York County targets along with where our trend data is located. So on this one, we have data from 2016 up to 2020. And you can see we also have our target shown there as well. Next slide. The moving forward section, we actually have actions. The steering committee finalized these actions, which came about because of our working group. So like Stan said, you have a huge, steering committee, keep going down. We did have 5 working groups. Those working groups came up with actions, and the steering committee then modified them and then eventually approved those on March 26th. Within the plan, there are what we call our high actions. There are approximately 85 of them. However, we have 90 actions that appear in the appendices, excuse me, that are ranked from medium to low. Next slide. And here is what an action actually looks like in the plan. As you can see, we have it in the black there under the action. What is the action? The type, is it a project? Is it a strategy? The time frame for it, is it a defined, it's a one and done, or is it an ongoing process? The organizations, that's kind of who's the lead. And in this, we have it from the YCPC to the YAMPO to Rapid Transit to PennDOT. And then we also have effort. Out of 5, one being we're already probably doing it or can do it in the blink of an eye, to 5, it's going to take some time to actually get it accomplished. In addition, throughout the plan, you'll see these little bubbles here. This one in gold that has the Great Trails means communities increased home values, York resident. These come from actually a while back we did a survey, and this is actually public comment that we had received from that survey, and we have put it where appropriate into the plan so everybody can see. Next slide. Will kind of already went over this. We just wanted to point out selection criteria. And of course, this is where, we run all of our projects, potential projects through our selection criteria, and then go to the technical committee with that listing. So we have it for the CMAC, maintenance, bridges, safety, and the transportation alternative set aside program. Next slide, Ben. I also just wanted to show, they all kind of look like this in the plan. We kind of have a flow chart, and then on the other side, we have an explanation of all that with the point totals that we know at this time and are awarded. So all of them have a flow chart with a better explanation of all those blocks. And I will say that this has really not changed at all from what we've been using, except for putting in performance measures. We are going to rate those as well. Next slide. And I'll turn this over to Chris Kava.
Good morning again. I'm going to go over a bunch of different slides related to our anticipated funding over the next 24, 25 years. So this is just a projected revenue graph of where we've been and kind of where we're going. So the number one, it was an increase of funding for fiscal year 21 and 22 based on the 2019 financial guidance. Number 2 was an increase in funding for fiscal year 23 and 24 based on the 2021 financial guidance. When we get to 3, that begins a decrease in funding due to the reallocation of those funds to the interstate system. So we trend down, and then everything is kind of flatlined from 2029 to 2045 as, we don't know what's going on from 2029 and to 2032, the financial guidance is flatlined. So we just kept it status quo from there. Obviously, this is going to change, and we will be able to update that as new legislation comes into effect. Next slide. Here's just a different way to show it. This is the total funding per every 4 years up until the horizon year of 2045. And you can see we're consistently around the $140 million mark for these 4 years. And then at the end, I will show how that contributes to attaining or meeting all of the anticipated projects that should be completed during this long-range plan timeframe. Next slide. This is the historic and projected county transportation fund. And there are several different things in play here, such as liquid fuels, the Marcellus Shale funds, Act 44 funds, as well as the implementation of the $5 local use fee and its impact on the amount of vehicles that are actually registered in the county. And then the blue line dictates the commissioner's match to transit based on the funding that comes in. I think they're capped at 15%. That's what we had talked with Rich Farr about at the last technical committee meeting. Next slide. So we have the capital improvement plan, which serves as a demonstration of financial constraint for our future investments. This essentially ensures that YAMPO has the necessary revenue to complete the projects and implement our goals and objectives that are outlined in the MTP. The TIP is also included within the CIP, and this is what is updated frequently to account for changes in projects such as schedule, scope, and cost. And it's updated regularly to reflect those changes. Next slide. The components of the CIP, which there was a link included in all the information that was sent out for the CIP. It includes the 2021 TIP, the 2025 to 2045 out years, unfunded projects, maintenance candidate projects, special plans, as well as the York County Bridge CIP, which is a 16-year CIP just for county bridges. And there is a demonstration of the CIP of the bridge section. The pink denoting that there should be a project happening here, but it was pushed out due to funding constraints within that 4-year period. Next slide. So the CIP has a horizon year in 2045. We have 4-year periods going up through 2044, and then 2045 beginning the first year of the new 4-year period. This CIP utilizes the revenue projections that were developed with the MTP, as well as utilizes category expenditure rates, which intend to meet the needs of the existing transportation network. So the CIP funding category percentages, we have categories such as miscellaneous, which include capacity, operations, improvements. We have safety, bike and ped, maintenance, and bridge. Those are all broken down into a certain amount, a certain percentage, and then based on our projections, we put the money or put the funding where it needs to go to meet the needs of the system. Next slide. So our financial constraint results, we ended up with 77 NHS road projects within the 2025 to 2045 time range, 19 on the interstate, Interstate 83 specifically, and 58 on the non-interstate NHS. It also includes 103 NHS bridge projects for this time period, 50 on Interstate 83 and 53 on the non-interstate NHS. We also included 409 funding to show the funding that can be used to meet the needs of the non-NHS system, which typically the 409 funds go to most of the time. And so based on our average of $7 million a year that we receive in 409 funding, approximately 14 miles of non-NHS roads could be paved within that if it's applied as a 2-lane roadway. And the 409 maintenance, we estimate that for every 4-year time period, we could complete 58 miles of resurfacing with those funds. The non-NHS maintenance projects based on the 2-lane roadway, $500,000 per mile. This comes from the leftover funds that we cover in with the NHS system, and the remaining funds we put towards the non-NHS system. So we have over this time period through the horizon year, based on the amount of money left over, we can complete approximately 297 miles of the non-NHS roadway with just that funding. Next slide. The unfunded projects. So we have the projects that we could not fit within financial constraint. We have 23 non-interstate NHS bridges, which if we complete in the planned year accounts for 68 million. And if they're pushed out, you can see what inflation does by pushing it out to $105 million. We have 41 NHS interstate bridges, as well as 12 NHS interstate road segment projects. And they all follow the same line of inflation if they are pushed out of their planned year. Next slide. Maintenance candidates. So we have our top 1/3 of bridges that are that we came up with through our bridge selection process. So did that go backwards? Yeah, thank you. Top 1/3 of bridges. So 8 non-NHS TY 12-year plan bridges and 20 local bridges, totaling approximately $30 million. However, that doesn't account for every single one of the projects, only accounts for the projects that I had the funding allocation available to me. And we also had several federal aid maintenance projects within this section. A lot of it is local federal aid roads. And out of the 3,000 road segments within York County, these are, like I said, that represent all of the non-NHS system, since we already contributed the NHS road segments earlier in the CIP and in the unfunded project section. Next slide. We also have special plans which identify improvements to the transportation system, which should be considered during the development of asset management projects. So essentially these locations are, we identify an asset management project, and then we find another project which can be bundled together within the same vicinity that we can combine and have a more efficient and effective project that will be more long-term for the area, as opposed to just that asset management project. And some have been evaluated and approved by YAMPO, and others need to be further evaluated before YAMPO commits any funding. Next slide. The next slide will be, these are the special plans that are outlined in the plan in the 3 YAMPO approved projects that we have so far. our Susquehanna Trail South, we have the Seeks Run Road project, and we have the Arsenal Road, which is Route 30, and Fairlane Drive projects. The rest need to be evaluated and then committed to by YAMPO. Next slide. Here is the 2021 York Bridge Capital Improvement Plan. It shows a 16-year expense. This is just kind of blown up to show a few years, but these are all the bridges that the county has identified funding for. So that is included as well. Next slide. And as I said earlier, our total revenue is kind of basically flatlined. We're at approximately 137 to 140 million for every 4-year periods. This kind of shows what our total expenditures would be if we did all of our maintenance projects, which is road and bridge projects within this time period. We have a lot more expenditures than we do revenue. So that's where we have 2 actions within the MTP, which attempt to address some of these issues for the long term. That way we can complete more projects, as well as what Will had mentioned earlier about the pathways and what comes out of T-ROC and what comes out of the possible federal legislation, which I know that they've been kicking around the amount of $2 trillion. So a lot of things to look forward to that will adjust these numbers, and we'll see where we can get. And as we get any announcements, this will be updated accordingly, and we'll be able to show a better picture of where our projects are and our funding is. That's all I have.